This is Virginia. With a population of nearly 9 million, it rarely gets attention as a single place. That's because Virginia doesn't have one dominant city. Instead, its population is spread across several regions that have historically developed on their own. While Northern Virginia developed around Washington, D.C., Richmond grew as a standalone capital and logistics center, and Hampton Roads formed around ports and military installations. For decades, these regions were clearly separate, but that separation has recently been shrinking. Over the past several years, population growth, housing development, and infrastructure have been expanding outward from each region at the same time. Growth hasn't stayed contained within metro boundaries. It has followed the same corridors, gradually filling in the space between cities. What looks like independent growth up close begins to look more connected when viewed at a larger scale. Virginia's major regions are no longer expanding away from each other, they're expanding toward one another, and that shift is quietly changing how the state functions. For most of the 20th century, Virginia's regions grew slowly and independently. The state industrialized later than the Northeast and never developed a single economic core. Agriculture, military spending, and government work were spread out rather than centralized. That pattern produced several mid-sized regions instead of one dominant city. Development stayed compact, and large stretches of land between cities remained rural. But this model no longer holds. The first major change was transportation. Interstates like I-95, I-64, and I-81 didn't just make travel faster, they changed where people could live. Areas that were once too far from jobs suddenly became viable. Over time, this pushed development outward from existing cities. Northern Virginia expanded along I-95, Richmond expanded north along the same corridor. Smaller cities and counties began absorbing growth from both directions. At first, this looked like normal suburban expansion, but unlike typical sprawl, it wasn't anchored to a single city. It was driven by multiple regions all at once. And this is where the pattern began to change. Northern Virginia plays a central role in this shift. With millions of residents and one of the strongest job markets in the country, it generates a consistent demand for housing. As prices rose near the core, people moved farther out. This expansion wasn't tied to one industry. Federal employment, defense contracting, technology, and data infrastructure all contributed to this influx of jobs in the market. And the result was steady, sustained pressure pushing development south in Virginia. And unlike boom and bust growth, the pressure didn't ease. Each year, more people, more traffic, and more demand for space in this area of the state. And at the same time, Richmond was changing. For much of its modern history, Richmond grew slowly. It remained affordable and relatively compact compared to Northern Virginia. But over the past decade, its economy has diversified. Logistics, healthcare, and manufacturing services have expanded across this region, alongside population growth. Remote and hybrid work also accelerated this trend. Living farther from Northern Virginia no longer meant disconnecting from its economy. Richmond became a realistic option for people who still worked with firms based in the North. And that didn't require mass migration. Even a small percentage shift was enough to matter. This resulted in increased demand for housing and development pushing outward. Historically, it was a clear boundary between regions, but today it functions as an overlap zone. People commute north from it, others commute south, and employers recruit from both directions. This kind of growth doesn't happen in isolation. It only occurs when regions begin functioning as part of the same system. Fredericksburg isn't becoming a major city on its own. Its role is different. It connects larger regions that are no longer operating independently. As development filed in along I-95, corridors followed similar paths. I-64 strengthened its connection between Richmond and Hampton Roads. Freight, port traffic, and logistics tied these regions together economically. Infrastructure investment reinforced this connection. Hampton Roads, while geographically distinct, became increasingly integrated into statewide growth. The Port of Virginia expanded, military spending supported supply chains, and jobs created along the coast supported development well beyond it. The region didn't pull away from the rest of the state. It became an anchor point within a larger network. But viewed up close, Virginia still looks divided. Different skylines, separate economies, and different local governments. But megaregions aren't defined by appearances. They're defined by how places function together. In Virginia, labor markets now overlap, infrastructure serves multiple regions at once, and housing pressure ripples outward instead of staying constrained. This transformation has been gradual, which is why it's easy to miss. There was no single announcement, no defining moment, and no obvious turning point. Development accumulated year after year, filling in the gaps that once seemed permanent. But quiet growth also brings challenges. Transportation is the most visible. Highways designed to connect separate metros now function as daily commuter routes. Traffic increases even without major population spikes in any one city. Congestion spreads because the system is regional, not local. While public transportation exists, it was never designed for this scale or pattern of growth. Rail connections are limited in frequency and speed, and most travel still depends entirely on cars. But despite these challenges, this shift is largely irreversible. Once regions begin functioning together, they never separate again. Economic ties deepen, infrastructure reinforces connections, and population patterns solidify.